Some folks might try to tell you the many virtues of nature, how it's magnificent or beautiful or something along those lines. I'd be inclined to agree with some of these favorable assessments, but there is at least one virtue I cannot ascribe to the natural world. That particular virtue is honesty. One could write a book about all of the little lies and big lies told among the insects alone. False pheromones, deceptive eye spots, and other such things are quite abundant. Sometimes the creature deceives a predator or prey, or even one of its own species. Indeed, one might easily fill a small library with the various case studies of nature's little falsehoods. Of course, a library would be a bit much to fit into a single video, so let us instead focus on just one narrow type of deception. A form of Batesian mimicry wherein a harmless creature masquerades as a dangerous one. The bees are a large and successful group of insects, easily recognized and fairly abundant wherever there are flowering plants. Given the preponderance of such forms of foliage, it is no surprise to find bees of all sorts in all sorts of places. The fact that the females are nearly always armed with venomous stings makes them all the more noteworthy. One could talk at length about the sting found in such insects, as it has its own odd story. It is derived from an egg-laying structure, the ovipositor. In many other insects, this structure is used to inject eggs into various things: the ground, a plant stem, a fruit, other insects. Not surprisingly, as only female insects lay eggs, only female bees and wasps have stings that are adapted from their egg-laying anatomy. In any case, regardless of the origins or precise mechanisms of the sting, it is a memorable experience for anybody who has ran afoul of an angry bee. Incidentally, the fact that a bee will die after stinging a person is only partially true. This is the case for honeybees, as they live in large colonies, and workers are fairly short-lived and quite expendable. The cost of a single worker's life isn't that high, and detaching a sting for the apparatus to keep pumping venom into the victim is apparently worth this cost. Most other bees can sting as many times as they like, provided they have the venom reserves to do so. Such armaments are usually enough to discourage most would-be predators. Thus, there is a definite advantage for an insect in resembling something like a bee. In some cases, this resemblance is a passing one at best. One example would be Trichius gallicus, sometimes called the bee beetle. It's a sort of scarab that is fairly fond of frequenting flowers, and at a glance, if you squint fairly hard, it could be mistaken for a rather rotund bumblebee. Another somewhat convincing mimic would be Bombylius major, sometimes known as the greater bee fly. Many flies within the family Bombyliidae bear a passing resemblance to bees and commonly visit flowers as pollinators. They also visit the nests of various sorts of bees and wasps to deposit their eggs. When the larvae emerge, they tend to make a meal out of whatever larvae are in that nest. A similar lifestyle is seen in a rather more convincing mimic, Volucella bombilans. This creature looks fairly convincing as a bumblebee. It is a type of hoverfly within the family Syrphidae, and it also lays its eggs in the nests of bees or wasps. The larval form in this case looks rather rough, being a sturdy sort of maggot with a dark brownish hue and several fleshy projections along its body. It has been described by one notable entomologist as crawling about in the guise of a hulking porcupine. Yet, while this lugubrious larva may appear to be rather alarming, it mostly lives as a scavenger, feeding on various bits of detritus within the nest. Of course, the local bee larvae may occasionally be on the menu, but they are usually not the main part of the diet. Many of the syrphid flies are similar mimics to bees or wasps. Another notable mimic is Merodon equestris, also known as the greater bulb fly. It gets this name from its larval habit of feeding on the bulbs of plants within the family Amaryllidaceae. It is largely regarded as a horticultural pest of narcissus flowers, and another one of its common names is the narcissus bulb fly. Regardless of the larval diet, the adult does bear a decent resemblance to a typical bumblebee. Another syrphid species of particular note is Aristalis tenax, the common dronefly. Instead of masquerading as a bumblebee, this fly resembles a honeybee. The larval stage is remarkably different, though, and fairly unique. These larvae live in foul pools of stagnant water where they live on a disgusting diet of whatever garbage happens to be within reach. Each possesses an extensible tube sprouting from its hindquarters, which serves as a sort of snorkel, allowing the creature to breathe the relatively clean air even when it is at the bottom of a cesspool. This breathing structure is remarkably long and thin when extended, and bears a passing resemblance to the tail of a mouse or a rat. In fact, these larvae are often known as rat-tailed maggots. While it is not a great stretch for a fly to resemble a bee, there are a few other insects that manage the mimicry with surprising effectiveness. Among the moths, and the hawk moths in particular, there are a few species that bear at least a passing resemblance to the bumblebees. As hawk moths in general are known for their hovering flight and a fondness for visiting flowers, it takes only a little bit of alteration to make one into a fairly convincing bee. One such species is Hemeris fusiformis, the broad-bordered bee hawk moth. Unlike many of its more crepuscular kin, this moth is mainly active in the afternoon. The larvae are typical sphingid caterpillars with the distinctive horn at the back end of the body. A rather more convincing moth mimic is Cetaspes xylocoparis, the eastern carpenter bee hawk moth. As the name suggests, it bears a resemblance to carpenter bees in the genus Xylocopa, which forms the basis of its species name Xylocoparis. This is another sort of moth that is active during the day, once again matching the habits of the bees it mimics as well as their appearance. After all, if one were to see a bee out foraging after dark, one might start to suspect something was a bit off. I could go on, but I believe this is a suitable sample of the multitude of mimics that proclaim the pretense of poisonous potency for their personal protection. Nature may be many things, beautiful, magnificent, mysterious, and inspiring, but very often it is distinctly dishonest.